Hey listeners, we're nearing the end of our 15th anniversary fundraising campaign, and we need your help to meet our goal. This campaign offers you a chance to win a unique food and music experience in one of the most exciting cities in America. Here's how it works. Donate to HRN and you'll be entered to win dinner for two and 2 tickets to a concert in one of 8 amazing cities: New York, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Nashville, Las Vegas, Charleston, Ardmore, Pennsylvania, and Asheville. All donations support our work educating food system storytellers. And when you donate, you can choose one of those cities and you'll be entered to win dinner and 2 tickets to a show. So help us reach our goal and enter to win dinner and a show in the city of your choice. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15. Thank you.
This episode of The Grape Nation is brought to you by Washington Wine. With over 1,000 wineries and 70 grape varieties, Washington State is home to wine the world is talking about. Learn more at washingtonwine.org. Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Gaia. We'll talk to Gaia about Barbaresco, Barolo, Tuscany, and more. We'll taste the Gaia, Barbaresco, and Barolo for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Born and raised in Barbaresco, Italy, Gaia is a 5th-generation winemaker. Along with her siblings and iconic father, Angelo, she oversees the family's legendary winery, Gaia, in Piemonte, Italy. Gaia represents a generational shift at the winery that dates back to 1859. Gaia has also been making wine in Tuscany and Bulgaria for over 20 years. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Gaia.
Thanks so much.
There's a lot to talk about, and I hope we can get everything in. But I think the best way to frame the interview is the first thing that I'm interested in is your journey in life and wine that got you to where you are, which is really at the top of the family business. Then when we get through that, I just want you to give me a quick history of Gaia.
Sure.
So tell me how you got to here.
I was born in Barbaresco 40 years ago from my mother Lucia and my father Angelo, which are both very, very much involved in the winery. And I always grow up with them in the village of Barbaresco, which is my hometown and is also the place where our historic winery is located. When you grow up in a village like Barbaresco, where everybody makes wine, and you are inspired by your father and your mother, that both of them are involved with wine, it's almost quite obvious that you grow the dream of doing what your parents are doing. So I always dream of being able of bringing forward this beautiful family project. I studied in my region, in the Langhe region. I went to university near Milan. I studied economy. After that, I spent 1 year in San Francisco getting introduced to the world of wine, the U.S.
Why
world of wine.
did you want to go to the U.S. and why San Francisco?
Because U.S. has been a very significant country for my family. My father, my grandfather was a leader in the production of fine wines, and his market was Italy and a little bit Switzerland and Germany. So my father is the one that started to present his wine, our Barbaresco, around the world. And unusually, in the late 60s, early 70s, unusually for many other producers, he didn't focus so much on the UK market or Germany, or those were considered the historic wine consuming countries. But he decided to come to US, which was very different from today as a market. There was not the gastronomic scene of today. There was not it was quite a challenging and unusual idea, because at the time Italy was represented by all, as my father called them, cheap and cheerful wines. So Italy was not at the time the country of fine wines, was the country of easy Lambrusco from cooperatives and Soave and Chianti in the Fiasco.
So the product was nothing great, and the effort for marketing and imaging was almost non-existent in the U.S.
There was not this expectation that Italy could make a fine terroir wines, no? And so it's funny, because my father's goal was absolutely not to make a cheerful wine, and not cheerful and cheap. So he focused a lot on U.S., and U.S. is a place where we got great rewards, and we grow a beautiful niche of wine lovers. That's an amazing job.
So while you were here, were you working on that a little?
And so, yes. And so I worked a little bit for a distributor, for an importer, for a wine store. And then I loved San Francisco so much that I almost thought, I'm going to stay here for good. Why going back to Barbaresco?
So why did you decide to go?
Because growing up in Barbaresco, I have to tell you that there's always been a sort of prison for me, because it's a tiny village. But in San Francisco, I had some beautiful friends that loved to drink beautiful bottles of wine. And sometimes they were also bringing bottles of my own wine. And funny enough, I understood that I was given for granted something very valuable. And I still remember Barbaresco 1989 that has been very significant for me, because I was in San Francisco and I was with friends, and when I drank that bottle, was so loud in the glass. It was a screaming of Barbaresco. Was smelling like my village, like my cellar.
That was your call back?
And so I said, wow, if this wine is so loud, it's talking to me so loud from the other side of the ocean, and it's significant.
So you leave San Francisco. You go back because you want to be with the family at the winery with the intent of working?
Yes. So
what year is this?
That was October 2004.
Okay.
So the profession of my family has been going on and passed from generation to generation, and is happening right now with us. And right now, I'm not the only one. I started in 2004, but my sister Rossana, that is 2 years younger than me, she started in 2009. And I'm very happy about announcing that my brother Giovanni started last year to work with us. So
all the siblings are together.
So I think it's very special. We are 5, my mother, my father, and us 3, all working together. And you know that apart from our historic winery Barbaresco, we also, my father developed 2 new projects in Toscana. I say new, but
we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, because I want to talk, I don't want to brush over it. So you come back and you basically dig in, your siblings join you, your dad is, prominent in the winery, and a lot of things happen from 2004 to now. Give me a little brief history of the winery, more of the modern, times. I think is it your grandfather, Giovanni?
Yeah. Sure. So, can I give just a background of the area? Because I think
however you want.
It's very special, the area of Langhe, where I'm from. So the area of Langhe is an area that is roughly 10,000 hectare big. And in the area of Langhe, there is the area of Barbaresco and Barolo, where Nebbiolo is mainly cultivated.
So is Barbaresco and Barolo in Langhe?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Which is in the Piedmonte region.
Which is in Piemonte
right.
region.
Okay, just
south,
so everyone can visualize.
Sure, south of Piemonte. And there we have a variety that is called Nebbiolo. And this variety is a variety that has gives you wine of great authenticity. What helps? Helps, for example, the fact that Nebbiolo, it's a variety that is cultivated all over the world in 7,000 hectares. Of these 7,000 hectares, 6,000 hectares are in Piemonte. So can you imagine this variety, how connected it is with Piemonte? So we also produce Cabernet in Toscana. Cabernet is a variety that is planted in 350,000 hectares around the world.
It's much smaller and more specialized to that area.
And the area of Langhe is an area that has an incredible identity. There is a very important human factor that is very strong. I mean that the number of producers are many, and they are almost all of them are growers, and they are family owned. So we are one of those families. So we start from an area that is famous for making wines that they have an authenticity and that they have a uniqueness. And with the variety Nebbiolo, as I was saying before, you can make a Barolo or a Barbaresco. Historically, the Barolo producers were the most acclaimed and the most iconic producer of my region, because
they got the attention.
They got the attention because I must say that Barolo is a little bit more historic than Barbaresco. Barolo is more structured, so has always been considered more ageable, more tannic and powerful.
So I was going to ask you this question later, but you approached it now. The difference between Barolo and Barbaresco, because people see both, and if they're not that well versed, you said that Barolo is more tannic.
Barolo, the soil in Barolo is the soil in Barolo and Barbaresco is the same, is clay and limestone, but in Barolo the soil is much more compact and gives you more compact structure, more tannic, more austere, wines of great structure, not immediately open and perfumed. You need to age them a bit longer. The wines from Barbaresco have always been compared to Barolo by, in the past they were saying Barbaresco is like a Barolo, but it's less. Barbaresco is like a Barolo, but less tannic, less structured, less ageable, less. So,
but not really. It's different, not less.
Yes, or maybe is less, and this is the amazing beauty of Barbaresco. No, so there is also the saying that less is more. So in Barbaresco.
But you're saying that the compaction of the soil in Barolo has an effect on the final,
on the structure of the wine.
Structure.
Yes.
It's amazing.
And then, of course, other things, the altitude. So Barolo is slightly higher in altitude than Barbaresco,
right.
So you get something with more sharp.
Right. All right, so continue with the little history lesson.
So it's very unusual, the history of my family, because my family has always been a family producing Barbaresco since 1859. So at that time, was regardless of how ambitious you were, how hard you were working, you could be the best producer of wine number 2. So my family focused, the first generation started in 1859 and then followed my great-grandfather, which obviously I didn't meet, but I met my grandfather Giovanni. He was born in 1908. He died in 2002. So I have a lot of memories of him.
He was around while you.
He was around, and
nice.
The thing, my grandfather was living for Barbaresco. His only mission in life was to put Barbaresco on the map and to make it known to the most.
And there were a lot of guys like that in the region.
Yes.
I mean, he was passionate, but the whole region were farmers and winemakers.
Yeah, but there is one thing that my grandfather had that with time I understood. My grandfather had a incredible faith. He had a belief in Barbaresco, and how important. When I think of him, I think that how, with so much dignity and belief, he was approaching everything. No, he had a great respect of his wine, of his work, of his time, of the time of the workers. So when you do things with the belief, I think that
The belief and conviction, the product is always going to be genuine.
yes, it's every time he had some bad vintages, he had no problem in selling in bulk what he thought was not dignifying his Barbaresco.
Didn't pass for him.
Yeah.
So he would.
So little by little, even though he was coming from Barbaresco and not Barolo, he became recognized that people could trust the quality of his wines. And then he did another thing that was very important. He bought some beautiful vineyards. So in the 30, 40, 50, 60s, in a moment when I also have to say that the region of Langhe was not as wealthy as it is today. It became wealthy in a very short time, but has always been
The
quite
property
miserable.
values.
Yes.
But he had the foresight to understand the land is what's important and I need more.
Our valuable resource was the land.
Right.
So with great knowledge about his village, he bought some beautiful vineyards. And then
your
my
dad
father,
is born to Giovanni, right?
Yes. My father comes in. My father was born in 1940, so it's a very important year for him this year. He's going to turn 80 in March.
That's a big year. Wow.
So he was born the 7th of March 1940, and in 1961 he started to work together with my grandfather.
At the ripe young age of 21.
Yes.
Okay.
And my grandfather had achieved already some great results. I was saying he bought some beautiful vineyard. The name of my winery, thanks to my grandfather decisions, was well known. So when my father came in, he started to focus on other aspects. He started to focus on reconsidering viticulture, winemaking, and bring new ideas.
Your dad comes in at the young age of 21. Your grandfather innovated, bought property, quality and all of that. Your dad comes in. Of course, it's not hard to talk about Gaia without getting into it with your dad a little. You always said he was an optimist, questioned everything. He was always looking for new ideas.
Very important.
So he comes in, and that's what he does. So let's talk about, when he gets there, does he start doing this right away? It's been many years. But let's talk about the things that he did.
For what I know, for the first 10 years, my grandfather didn't allow him to touch the wine.
All right, so that kind of sounds typical, right?
So you go in the vineyard and you work and you
stay
learn
over here.
And you stay over there. So, but
I'm sure he was anxious to get going.
Yes, my father is a very impatient person and he's always thinking and thinking. So there are some people in the villages that they remember my father when he was 20 years old, driving the tractor very fast.
Right. Want to get from here to there.
Yes, and very fast walk. Always, I can see that even now is like this. So when
tell me about innovations and changes. So it's ironic. For 10 years, patiently, he stood by the side of his dad, and then at a point on, he had a very impact.
But I can tell you that one thing I learned by working near my father is that for him, the research of quality is it has to do with trying to be different. So without trying to be different, there would be, can you imagine, there would be no comparisons. The quality would not grow. So when he has to take a decision, usually he always favors an idea that is different. And he is...
That's called a contrarian.
Is a contrarian, yes.
For sure, right?
See, but
calculated.
But based on knowledge. So before taking a decision, you also study and try to understand every detail of these new decisions he's taking. So all his life he has been like that. When he started to work in the winery, he loved the wines, but he also had the feeling that it was complicated to consistently achieve all we could achieve, because some issues, I don't know, he started to change the density of plants per hectare. The density were much lower at the time respect to today. So
not much thought was given to that. You just planted, harvested, made wine. He started looking at everything and making changes.
He started to try it. His focus was, let's try to have as much as possible to achieve ripe grapes every year. Why don't we always achieve a full ripeness in grape? Because the production was also a bit wider. There was a bit more quantity produced per plant respect to today. So imagine
cut back.
Yeah, for a late ripening variety like Nebbiolo, if on top of that you have big bunches and you have a lot of bunches on a plant, it takes even longer for the vine to ripe it. And so how could he reduce the quantity per plant? Higher density, more competition between vines, no? Searching for rootstock that had less vigor. So for sure, every time he had to replant the vineyards, he started to replant them with a different exposure. No, sorry, the vineyard always has the same exposure. It can be a south-facing slope.
Right.
But instead of planting the rows horizontally, he was planting them vertical. Which makes the sun, for example, touch both sides of the rows during the day, instead of having only one side.
And if you drove by, it would be very noticeable because everyone's going this way.
Sure. But there is I'm not saying that this was the right way of doing things. It was his way of doing things, because it doesn't exist the best way.
Right.
There is the good and the bad in everything you do.
Right.
And then he didn't only implement a different way of doing viticulture, because he introduced short pruning. With Nebbiolo, usually in the past people were leaving 12, 15 gems, no? And each gem makes grapes, bunches, and so was kept very long, the branch from where the grapes were growing. And my father started to short down the number of gems, bringing it down to 8. And this was very innovative at the time. And then on top of that, started to also introduce the green harvest.
Which is what?
Green harvest is, but he started to do it systematically on every vineyard. Green harvest means that in the month of June, July, meanwhile you are approaching harvest time, little by little you start to cut and drop on the floor bunches that are developing. So you reduce the number of grapes that remain on the plant, so that all the energy of each vine goes concentrated, goes focused.
And the quality.
Yes, on the few bunches that you leave on the plant. So a lot of things started to change inside the vineyard, and so the grapes started to change. You started to have grapes that were more they were reaching ripeness.
Consistency and ripeness was his goal, and he was able to accomplish.
Yeah. And so he, because he had a different raw material, he started also to try different things inside the cellar. So he started to approach maceration with a different idea, no? Trying to be kinder in the way of crushing the grapes.
Gentler, less intervention.
Because when you have grapes that are more ripe,
Right.
you don't need to.
Right.
They can be extracted more easily. And then he also introduced fermenters that had a thermocontrolled temperature, which were an innovation at the time. They came out in the early 80s, and immediately
So that was
tried
new.
them.
And malolactic.
And then the malolactic, we started to make it in wood. He introduced a small
He had
cask.
this, I wouldn't say obsession, but French oak and other oak, right?
I think that the innovation was not to take French oak and bring it to the cellar. The innovation was not to take barrique, that is a tool more common of France, and bring it to the winery. The innovation was to study and to be open to this new tool and try to understand how to adapt the use of a small cask to a variety like Nebbiolo, and how to adapt it to our tradition. Because in the cellar we never kicked away the big barrels.
Right.
We always kept them, but we also introduced barrique. So he's always open to experiment, and is not afraid of new new
Even
ideas.
today.
No, even today, even though he's turning 80, I think
Yeah.
it's really a characteristic of his personality. He believes that quality comes from an open-mindedness. He has never been dogmatic. And so I was saying before that my grandfather...
Do you carry that? I mean, is that part of the way you see things?
He's very brave and very positive.
More than anyone.
I am a little bit less than him.
But kudos to him for how long ago, how long he's been doing it, and all the risks.
Yeah, but it's nice that in the family there is a strong belief, because we are very proud and we truly believe that we are doing something special. But at the same time, there is also a pillar of our philosophy is the doubt, the always open mind to new way of doing things without being convinced 100% that what we do is the only way.
Right.
So we believe, but also we are open to
What's
new
your
things.
relationship with him now?
It's fun.
I know, wasn't there a story where... There were a couple of stories where you clashed on major things, like the Barbaresco DOCG, biodynamic farming, where you had ideas you would discuss with him, right?
Yes, we discuss a lot. At least I have a father that is open-minded, so we can discuss and he listens, and then maybe he has a different idea and he tried to convince me and I try to convince him, and we go back and forward. And sorry, I keep saying me, but I have to tell you that we are like one only thing, me, my brother,
Right.
and my sister.
Right. That we know that.
Yeah. About biodynamic, for example, in reality, we are not biodynamic. I'm not presenting my wine as organic neither, even though there is an incredible attention to biodiversity, which is the main focus of our viticulture, despite we have been able of eliminating every sort of chemical synthesized product, and we are very low with sulfur and copper. But
So without the labels,
yeah.
you're applying the practices.
We do apply the
As
practices,
much as-
but are practices that we try to develop. So we don't follow a certain protocol.
Right.
And this, see, I have to give credit to my father, because when I started to work in 2004, moved by a great ambition, I started to say to my father, let's apply, let's do one step forward, let's push it a little bit, and let's apply biodynamic farming, which is the ultimate dream of every producer. And my father thought about it a little bit and then came back to me and he said, I think we have to do something different. And I said, but Dad, that's different.
That was different.
That's different.
then.
There's no one here that does this sort of farming. So that's a way to be different. And he thought about it again, and then after a while he came back to me and said, no, but there are already producers that are biodynamic. We have to do something different. And at the beginning,
very consistent with his
philosophy. And at the beginning, I thought that I was very upset about this because it's the ultimate achievement that I had in mind. But I have to again give him a big credit for helping me to develop a new system of working that is very original, and there is a value by the fact that our way of working is original. So the way we farm the land today is with our historic workers, with our team, and they represent our know-how and our tradition. But in the last 15 years, we added little by little a group aside of our team that is a group of university professors. I can say that they are sort of consultants, and what they have in common is that none of them is an expert of viticulture or winemaking. So we can grow our knowledge by having synergies with the university professors that are experts of other things, that are botanists.
It's sort of a next step, tapping into the diversity of their talent and knowledge. Right?
Trying to understand what goes on in our vineyard. Yeah,
you thought you knew everything, and there's so much more.
And in reality, we know about vines, but we don't know about the grass, about...
So let me ask you this. Is Barbaresco, Barolo, Piedmont, Langhe, is that a region that's been affected by climate change?
Sure.
You know, when you harvest, I know you had a quest for ripeness and consistency. Mm-hmm. You know, how did that play in? I mean, does that push you towards, as you mentioned, biodiversity and
yes, because
sustainability?
I think that every producer around the world today is more careful to sustainability. Everyone tries in a way or in another to be more sustainable. I think that climate change is giving to every producer around the world so many new challenges that became even more clear that is the vineyard the place where you have to solve those challenges. So in the 80s, in the 90s, the big topic was the cellar. Are you using barrique? Are you using big cask? How long is your maceration? Which sort of fermenter you use? So the discussion of quality was much more focused on the cellar than not the vineyard. Climate change switched.
Now you have to pay attention.
Switched the topic back to the vineyard, and we think that the only way we can counterface climate change and the challenges of climate change is to bust our land, our soils of life, is to keep them alive. Because climate change is presenting a bigger stress, is stressing our vines more, and not only the vines, is stressing the soil much more. So can you imagine, so why biodiversity can be an answer to climate change?
Right.
Easy example. You can have now quite prolonged months, time with drought and very high temperature. An example was 2017. In Barbaresco, but also in Toscana, we got 80 days without rain, and the temperature that every day they were going up to 100 Fahrenheit.
Hot.
And then during the night they were not dropping so much. So can you imagine how stressful it is for vines and for soil to go through 80 days of dry and super hot days? So if you have a soil that is alive, if you have a soil that is full of biodiversity, basically if you have a soil that is full of organic matter, which are leftover roots of grass that grow on it and then died, you have in your soil a sort of sponge. You have a soil that is able of holding moist more than a soil that has no life inside. At the same, so can be, if you have an alive soil, it's a soil that reacts to drought. If you have a soil that is covered by grass, you have a soil that has a sort of umbrella on it. It's a soil that doesn't get burned immediately by the sun.
Natural barrier.
Yeah, but also climate change is giving us much more violent rains. So you have a huge amount of water coming down. The same quantity of water that comes down in a week now can come down in 15 minutes. So especially in the area of Barolo and Barbaresco, where you have a very steep hills, is a big problem, erosion. So if you have a soil that has grass, is a soil that doesn't get eroded.
Less erosion.
Less erosion.
And can suck some of the rain up too.
Exactly. And so biodiversity can help you with these extremes. And without mentioning the problem with sicknesses, because when we think about climate change, we think about a bigger sun that makes the photosynthesis, makes the circle of vegetation goes faster. But it's not only plants, also animals. Insects, for example, from the moment they put down the eggs and the moment that they develop, they go faster. So you have much less frame of time to understand what's going on in your vineyard and understand how to fight the new pest. Everything is going faster. So also the topic of pests is becoming, they are more complicated to be fought.
Right, the whole culture of the vineyard.
Yeah.
Cover crops, pests, birds.
Yeah, and warm weather is appealing to many of these. They live a longer life.
Right.
New one are coming in. So if you have
plant vigor, preventing erosion, and soil quality are really
soil quality and biodiversity, meaning that if you have a vineyard that is rich in grass, in flowers, that has a lot of insect, funguses, it's a vineyard where one issue doesn't prevaricate on the others. You create a balance.
We have to take a quick break, but before we do that, I wanted to ask you one question. Women seem to play an important role in wines and wineries and the families in Piedmont, maybe more than other areas. I think there are two important people in the Gaia universe, that are important. I think your mom, who's sort of a quiet giant, you didn't mention her, but she's of it.
She's the most unreplaceable.
And then, was it a grandmother who just had this obsession for quality?
The grandmother of my father.
Yeah.
She had her name was Clotilde Rey. And again, I didn't meet her because she died in 1961, but I heard so many things from my grandfather and from my father. She was very charismatic. She was very severe. She was a woman never smiling, but she was so strong in personality that she was directing all the decision in the family. She was the keeper of the savings, and thankfully, because maybe also because of the fact that she was a teacher. So she knew how to write, how to read. She had a culture, which in the countryside was unusual. In the countryside, farmers have an incredible culture about the soil, but she brought a different vision and ambition and the pride that was not there before.
So a major influence.
Influence, and especially because then she raised my grandfather, my father, and she brought them to...
Strong women make great wines. Yes. All right, Gaia, we have to take a quick break. Hold your thought. We're talking to Gaia from the winery Gaia. When we come back, I want to get into the wines. I want to taste a few things. I didn't tell you this, but I'll subject you to our wine list where you have to answer a couple of questions. So you're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We'll be right back.
This episode of The Grape Nation is brought to you by Washington Wine. Great wine requires great fruit, and Washington State's wine growing region have that department covered. Washington is home to 14 growing regions, 1,000 wineries, and 70 grape varieties, including Riesling, Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Syrah. Learn more about Washington wines and their growers at washingtonwine.org. During this time, it's more important than ever to support independent growers and winemakers, no matter where you are. There are options to shop online and join Washington wine clubs that ship nationally. Find out about the wines the world is talking about at washingtonwine.org.
Okay, we're back. We're back with my guest, Gaia. And Gaia, I want to talk to you. First, I want to set it up and tell me if I'm wrong. You one of the things you do with the wineries, you travel the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, you are a touch point, you are an ambassador, you're a representative. I think Barbaresco and Barolo are celebrating a great time now.
You're right.
I think the recognition, the popularity, the collectability, the critical acclaim is sort of at a great spot. I don't think it's going to peak and go away. I think it's finally, at a level.
Sure.
Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. I think that
why is that and why now?
The wines have never been better than today, yeah? And this is because, in part, I have to say that despite we are worried about climate change, how can we not admit that climate change also helped? Because a variety like Nebbiolo that ripens so slowly and so late, like all the other late ripening varieties, they have been helped by the fact that now you can pick them in October, November, but you can pick them under a beautiful warm sun and not under pouring rain.
Right.
But is also the quality of the producer that raised the winemaking style. So I think that the Langhe region went through 25, 30 years of fights between producers, because my father was pushing for a change and introducing new ideas, and many producers followed him. And there were many producers that they were representing the tradition, and they were upset about these changes, and they were seeing only the bad side and not the good side of the innovations. So through this, what happened, thanks to new ideas that were introduced in the 70s, 80s, like we were saying before, oak treatment, rootstock, and so on, started between producers a confrontation and a questioning of tradition that for hundreds of years never happened. So through this painful confrontation, people learned, and all of them, they improved. So you notice that just 15, 20 years ago, there was the description of a wine was this is a traditional wine, this is a modernist wine. Now we are over that.
Right.
It's no longer,
it doesn't have to be.
The style is refined, which is great because it's giving you a chance of having even more of a pure expression and precise expression of the variety and of the site. So right now, all the producers are making wines better than in many other regions. And everyone, to improve and to innovate, is focusing in viticulture. And so this is the new boundary, the new way to improve. So all producers are really producing better than in the past.
I'm curious, because if you look at certain regions, if you look at Napa, there's been a movement towards restraint. There were these big, opulent wines. Were the wines that way in Barbaresco and Barolo? They were just these big wine. Are they more restrained now? Is that part of the evolution of, what they've become or the quality, or have they been similar for the past 20, 30 years? Now, you may have been making wines that have been more restrained, but in general.
Ma the wines of Barolo and the producers of Barolo and Barbaresco, they always had a little bit of a complex. When they started to compare themselves around the world, they started to have a complex of being too harsh, too dry, not expressive of fruit. So a way to improve was also from all the producers starting to focus in trying to have wines more full, more fruit forward. So in this trend that also helped everyone to make better wines, there have been some extremes, and those extremes perhaps were more evident in the 90s, in the 2000s. So you also had more examples of wine that were slightly more baroque in style, and for sure in the last 10 years there has been a going back in that. So like is happening in Napa.
Yeah.
So
there are less, wines that way. So it did make a move in that sense. All right, let's talk about the wines specifically. Gaia is Barbaresco.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gaia makes Barolo. Correct me if I'm wrong, you make about 4 Barbarescos?
Yes.
4 Barolos?
We make 3 Barolo and 4 Barbaresco. But when my historic family Barbaresco is on the label as only one word, Barbaresco.
Barbaresco.
Yes.
No vineyard.
No vineyard designation.
No designation.
No.
Right.
Are 14 different sites. And then we make 3 single vineyard Barbaresco, focus only on a site. Sori San Lorenzo, Sori Tildini, and Costa Russi.
Right.
Yeah.
So quickly, each bottling is a different site. How much difference is there in soil exposure? The Barbaresco is a blend of different sites.
Yeah.
The other ones are expressions of that site, right?
Yeah. When you come, if you just Google Barbaresco or Barolo, go to check pictures of how the area is, you will discover that it's very dramatic, the shape of the region. So when you come to Barolo and Barbaresco, you don't have one only big valley, but you have endless numbers of valley with different shapes. You don't have a flat land, but you have a lot of hilly sites. So respect, for example, to Bordeaux, where when you talk about Bordeaux wines, it's all about the soil, because Bordeaux is flat, and so it's really the soil,
right.
the
It
element,
varies from Saint-Emilion to Saint-Julien, but the
more important element that differentiates the wines is the soil. I don't mean that the soil is not important in Langhe.
No.
It's super important. But what is even more important than the soil is your vineyard, at which altitude is planted, if it's on the top of a hill or in the middle, if it's facing south or west or east, if it's very steep or less steep, if it's close to the river or more far away. If you mix all these characters together with a soil that can be more compact, less compact, geologically older, with more sand, you have endless types of wine. With one only variety, Nebbiolo, that is a variety that is a perfect terroir variety, if I can use this expression, meaning that Nebbiolo is a very essential, pure variety. It's not a variety that actually booms in the glass for its perfumes and doesn't even have an intense flavor. It's a variety that stays back. So when we talk about people, we have different personalities, but Nebbiolo has a very discreet, quiet personality. So it's a variety that really gives you the opportunity of showing the soil and showing the vintage more than anything else.
So the different sites express what's going on right there.
Yeah.
And that's why you separate that. Now, what about the Barolos?
The Barolos is the same. Barolo and Barbaresco all have this shape and characteristic. The Barolo wines are, in a way, for me, I like to say that Barolo are more earthy. They are like the expression. When I smell a Barolo, I can smell the earth. I can smell a
more
wet soil.
More than the Barbaresco.
See, and I can smell whatever is underground, so the roots. or the truffles, or the moist of the soil. When I smell a Barbaresco, I can smell the air. Barbaresco is ethereal. It's flowers, is sweet spices, is crunchy red fruit.
Right.
So they are two different expressions of
Right.
Nebbiolo.
Let's talk about vintages. I think of late there's been some
Yes.
pretty good vintages.
Yes, we've
The
been very lucky.
16, 15.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
give me a little take on each one.
I also have to say that I really like 14, despite...
But was that considered a tough vintage?
It was, and it was very, very tough.
Good winemakers make good wine in tough vintages, and I
Tough
don't think
vintage.
Gaia is going to be questioned. So,
If you have a good site in 2014, you made something
Right.
very nice.
so 14 tough year, but you felt you were able to make good
It
wine.
was tough because the summer was so rainy that nothing ripened in the summer. But then in September and October, the
Dried
weather
up.
continued to be very cold, but and not so sunny, but dry. And so the grapes they fully ripened, and you have what I find very interesting of 14 is that you have a very, very ripe tannins, because the grapes they ripe fully well, but they ripe in a cool climate. And so it's very ripe, but doesn't have a fruit expression. It's more subtle. It's very interesting, and becomes more and more rare, a vintage like that. And then we had a 2015 vintage, which is actually the wines we're going to drink now. The Barolo is 2015, and 15 was very warm, and it's a vintage that. So was warm, especially the summer was warm and dry. So the vineyards that have more compact soil, they perform very well, because those soil, when you have a compact soil, it takes longer for that soil to dry out, to warm up. And so those vineyards, and especially in Barolo area, where the soil is more compact, they went through the dry and hot summer much better. And you end up having wines that they have a classic structure, but at the same time they have an expression of fruit, and they have a roundness and that is much more appealing than usual.
It sounds like a good vintage.
Very good.
And then 10 was great.
And then 10 very classic, yes. Classic, middle structure. All the wines for me are middle structure. They're not full structured.
What does that mean? Meaning, I think I know what you mean. They're middle, medium in body or presentation. They're not light. They're not a heavy wine. They're right where they should be almost.
Yeah, sometimes I have the feeling that if it's the first time you try a Barolo or a Barbaresco and you heard so much about Barolo and Barbaresco, you can even get disappointed, meaning that when you hear something, you expect maybe a bigger wine. And I think that the wines, they have big tannins, but they are also fleeting, and they are quite...
Right. It's not everything you want.
They're not super compact and concentrated.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Right. You're also making white wine.
Yes.
One of the early white wines was named after you.
Yes.
That's a Chardonnay-based wine.
Yes, this was one of the experiments that my father started in the late 70s. If you go to a beautiful wine region like Burgundy is, you have a Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And with those two varieties, you can make complex and ageable wines. It's like they walk the same road. When you come to Piemonte, you have an incredible variety that is Nebbiolo, and then you have beautiful varieties like Moscato or Arnese, but they walk another road. They don't go in the same direction. So my father had the will of trying to see if it was possible to have a white wine that could reflect the site at the best, because for us, if you want the wine is the memory of a place.
Right.
So to have a more neat and precise and deep memory of a place, you need to have a wine that can age, because when the wine is young, the wine is more superficial. That's why the memory, when you smell a young wine, you have a fruit, flowers. It's almost like the wine is remembering that just 3 years before was fruit and flowers. Right. If you wait 10, 15, because if you have a wine that can age, then becomes very precise, the expression of a site. So he tried with a variety, Chardonnay, that we already knew in the late 70s that had an aging potential. And he thought, good, it's a variety that can age as much as a Nebbiolo does. Here we have the soil, the climate, we have an ethic for making ageable wines, red. Let's see if we can do the same with white. And so in 1979, on the top of a hill facing south in a perfect spot for planting Nebbiolo and making Barbaresco, he decided to pull out the Nebbiolo and tried a white grape, never tried before. White that for my local people has always been considered a joke respect to the serious wine is red, is not white. That's a bit the idea in the area. But I think that Gaia is serious white wine.
So not large production, right?
Gaia we have now we have 2 vineyards. The one that was planted in 1979 in Barbaresco, and then in 1988 we could buy a piece of land in Serralunga, Barolo, and so we now our Gaia comes from both Barbaresco and Barolo area, and we have a production of 1,800 cases.
So it's small. Relative to the other things. All right, we can't move ahead without talking about another important part of the history line of Gaia. In the mid-90s,
sure,
you ventured about, 300 kilometers away to Tuscany in the Bulgari.
Yeah.
So tell me about, there are a couple of wineries there. Why did you go there?
Sure. Because again, my father needs dreams, and the more time goes on, the more he doesn't want to live with regrets, but he wants to keep himself engaged with the new dreams and new challenges,
new opportunities, challenges.
And also, yes, and also he thought about his family. In 1993, my brother was born, 14 years after me. Same mother, same father. But
you didn't have to say that.
Well,
that happened.
It happened. And so the family growed, and so suddenly there was me, there was my sister, there was my brother. My father felt very optimistic about the future of the family business. He also had no idea if we siblings were going to be tied together and going along well or not. And so he's always thinking, and so he thought, okay, if I have 2 other sites, they can take care each one of his own site. He was unable even of thinking that we didn't want to be in the wine business. He thought about developing a business for each one. So in 93 Giovanni was born. In 94 he bought a little estate in Montalcino. It was a running estate, a beautiful estate producing Brunello di Montalcino, and so we continue. We took over the production of Brunello. The winery is called Pieve Santa Restituta.
Pieve.
Exactly.
Santa Santa.
Restituta.
Restituta, whatever. I'll post everything.
And Pieve Santa Restituta takes the name from a church because it's incredible. We bought 27 hectares.
The church is on the property,
yes,
right?
Yes, and in the center there is a church. And
you've restored
We restored it. And
that's special.
Yes.
Now, can people come and visit the church, or it's on the family property?
But the church is on the family property. Sometimes it happens that people come and they ask if they can walk in the church.
So you're making, what is it, a couple of wines?
We make Sugarille that everybody thinks.
Renina?
Yes, Renina. Sugarille people think come from the word sugar, right. And so they say Sugarille. But no, is the, I don't know how you say in English, is the toponymic toponimo, is the historic name of the site. And Sugarile comes from the Italian word sughero. Sughero is a cork tree. So Sugarile for sure means that there were a lot of cork trees around. So we make a single vineyard, Brunello. So it's a very unusual Toscan way of making wine. It's more Piemontese, the idea of the single vineyards.
You brought
Our philosophy, our vision of wine. So usually when you are in Montalcino, there is Rosso di Montalcino, then there is Brunello di Montalcino, and then there is Brunello di Montalcino Riserva. What's the difference? That the Rosso di Montalcino is made always with Sangiovese, but comes out with a fast aging quickly. The Brunello, by law, has to be released 5 years after the vintage. Brunello Riserva is 1 year longer of aging, comes out after 6. We work only with Sangiovese and we make only Brunello. We don't make Rosso and we don't make Brunello Riserva.
Right.
We make a single vineyard Sugarile. We make Rennina that comes from 3 vineyards that are touching each other, that are all in the same area. And then we make Brunello without name of area or without name of vineyard. And it's a blend of Sangiovese coming from every site.
Yes. And not to get complacent or bored, you wanted to work with other varietals. So you stay in the region and I guess you go a little west? To Bulgari?
West, exactly. An area where I would move. Personally, I find it stunning. When I leave Barbaresco, bello, yes, it's very nice. It's wild. It's wild, meaning that you have vineyards, but you have a lot of woods.
It's still that way, so that's
still
special.
quite wild, yes.
Nice.
And then you are close to the beach, close to the sea. There is a beautiful light all years long. And actually it would even make sense to move to Bulgari as we have a winery. But for now, I think that when you take over, when you are trying to learn a profession, and when you are lucky enough to have a master, and I have a master, it's important to stay close together. So the reason why I live in Barbaresco and my siblings do the same is that in learning a profession, there are things that you have to learn from books, but then there are other things that they are just they happen. It is an oral conveyance, and you can't learn commitment. You can't learn attitude. You can't learn a taste. It's only by living close together that, almost in an esoteric way, at the end they pass.
It makes total sense. Just because physically a vineyard is over here.
Yeah.
You need to be together as a family because of all the dynamics that are important.
But I really love Bulgari, and I travel down to Bulgari every week.
So tell me some of the wines you're making. The varietals are more European, right?
The varieties are Bordeaux varieties, because Bulgari is a new region for Italy and is working with new varieties, basically. It's the seaside of Tuscany didn't have a long history with the production of wine, simply because is a flat area near the seaside that often was flooded, and so there was not an agriculture an agriculture like vineyards. When you plant vineyards, they live for 70 years. It's a very long relation that you have with plants. So it's the area of Italy that became very well known for the production of Cabernet Sauvignon mainly. Few areas are exceptional for the production of Merlot, and there is also very good production of Cabernet Franc. And so there we focus a lot on Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot.
And that is Camarcanda?
Camarcanda.
Right. So you have Pieve Santa Restituta and Camarcanda, which are your Tuscan, Bulgari properties. I will post everything. All right. We have to wrap up soon, but nobody leaves without answering my wine list. I'm going to ask you 5 questions about your wine preferences.
You didn't tell me about that.
Don't dwell on them. It's
Okay.
easy. You won't be stumped. So here's the first question. What are you drinking now? What's in the fridge? What are you experimenting with? Do the seasons change? When you travel, do you try other things? We're drinking
now-
Barbaresco and Spirits, but what do you...
Now I love to drink young vintages. I'm focusing a lot on young vintages. Of Barbaresco, especially. Is a great way for me to learn about what the other producers do, what's their...
You're talking other people's wines too?
See,
Everything. Okay.
I enjoy that.
So you're drinking Nebbiolo young vintages.
Often I do, yes.
Anything non-Nebbiolo?
Sure, I drink Riesling. I enjoy Riesling, Gruner Veltliner from Austria.
I enjoy those too.
Obviously, I'm very intrigued by Nerello Mascalese in Sicily because we have a project there.
With the Grassi family?
Yes, with this incredible man that is called Alberto Gracci, Sicilian producer.
Mount Etna.
Mount Etna, yes.
So Nerello
Mascalese. Nerello Mascalese is a variety that is very similar to Nebbiolo.
All right, so you're drinking that. Those are terrific wines, great value, great quality. They're kind of hot too.
Yes.
This is the other one. All right, good on the first question. Second question. This is kind of the goofiest question. Do you have a favorite wine and food pairing? Is there something as a kid or an adult when you put this food and this wine together? It's just...
But I don't know if people
and not
here...
something you eat all the time.
I don't know if here people eat rabbit.
No.
We do.
Very big in Italy. So rabbit prepared how?
Roasted rabbit
Roasted?
with some wine. So it's very important which wine you use.
Well, that's the question. Which wine?
Barbaresco.
Okay.
And then I drink it with Barbaresco.
All right. This question, it's what's your favorite wine restaurant and or bar? Now, I do the show in New York, and a lot of the people are based in New York, but in the small village of Barbaresco in that area, are there good places where they have good wine and good wine knowledge? I mean...
I don't want to offend anyone because I have a long
I'm always
list
afraid of that.
Of favorite. But if you tell me I have to say one, then I really enjoy the restaurant in Serralunga called Centro Storico that is run by Alessio and Stefania.
Okay.
Alessio has a nickname. Everybody knows him as a Ciccio. And Ciccio is a guy that is very entertaining and he loves Nebbiolo and he has an incredible selection of Nebbiolo and Champagne.
That's what I was looking
I really
for.
like that place.
All right, two more questions. Do you have a favorite all-time wine? Do you have a wine that... The question used to be, what was the rarest, most expensive wine that you tasted? Now it's more, what's the most important wine you've had or had the biggest impact on you? Was it that 87 in San Francisco?
Yeah, I was going to say that. The Barbaresco 89 was very significant
89.
for me. Yeah.
So that's a wine that still resonates with you.
Yeah.
All right, last question. This may be tough for you, but I think you could do it. Can you recommend a red and a white wine for 15 to 20 American dollars that my kids in their 20s can't afford to spend 40, 50, and they don't want to bring a crappy bottle for 10? You could give me a category. Like Riesling is, you can get...
For my region, I really enjoy Dolcetto.
Okay.
And Dolcetto is
Dolcetto
absolutely
is a great answer.
Oh, and it's misunderstood. And this word, the Dolcetto, people think is dolce, is sweet, and it's there has been no one among the Dolcetto producers that has been able of promoting and explaining Dolcetto outside from Piedmont. And it's a wine that is an everyday wine. There are some beautiful Dolcetto.
Give me a white example.
And
like
the
that.
white example.
Doesn't have to be from the region, just what you think is
love Verdicchio from Marche. There are so many local varieties in Italy that now are produced with much more ambition and the focus on quality than in the past. Verdicchio is one of those.
That's a
Sharp,
good answer.
fresh, tasty, beautiful variety.
Two great answers. All right, before we wrap up, let's do a little tasting. It's not every day you have a couple of Gaias in front of you. We started, I think we poured out the Barbaresco.
Sì.
So this is 2016, which we discussed was a good vintage year. So this is a young wine. Tell me, this wine in its youth, how's it going to drink? And its ageability, how is it going to drink? And tell me a little about the wine.
It's 2016 is we forecast, we don't have the crystal ball, but we forecast it's going to be one of the most ageable vintages ever that Piemonte, that Barbaresco had. When you drink it, you can feel that there are firm tannins, so there is a sort of austerity and severeness in the wine. But the grapes were so ripe, and we had so many up and down in temperature during the spring and the fall, that the wine gained a juiciness that is wrapping those tannins, that makes the wine very enjoyable, and the perfume is very complex. This up and down in temperature help the grapes not just to express ripe fruit expression, but when you drink it, you can talk about it for a long time. There are a lot of citrusy notes, orange, tangerine. There are a lot of flowers expression, fruit. And there is also, I love the cleanness and the purity of this vintage.
It's very linear and pure.
Yeah, lean, essential.
Yes. And this can age 20, 30?
This wine, I am the first investor in my own wines.
Okay.
Meaning that
you bought a lot of it?
I kept a lot of it. I think it's going to turn very useful in 20, 30 years from now.
Okay, so this is a long hold. But how is it drinking now? If people are anxious and they're in a restaurant and restaurants tend
it's drinking beautifully.
Okay, so it's good to drink now.
Totally, yes.
All right, now let's try, because I got to get you on an airplane. Let's try, we're going to go back a vintage year, 2015. We're moving from Barbaresco to Barolo.
Sì.
The Sperse bottling, SPERSS, that's the vineyard Sperse?
Yes, Sperse is the name that we gave to the vineyard. It's a vineyard that we bought in 1988. And Sperse, this is our first vineyard outside from Barbaresco. It's 20 kilometers far away from Barbaresco. And Sperse in our dialect means nostalgia. So my father wanted to use a dialect word, Sperse, and it's a bit of a dedication to my grandfather that always had an incredible sense of nostalgia for the village of Serralunga, simply because when he was a child, you remember he had a mother, Clotilde Rey, that was a very tough, severe mother, right. And there was a specific moment in the year, harvest time, when my grandfather was allowed to leave home and to stay 10-15 days with friends in Serralunga, helping them picking the grapes. And for him, those 10-15 days were the best of the year. He could be away from his mother, he could be free, could stay out until late. So despite he never had land in Serralunga, when you were mentioning Serralunga, he was turning on, his eyes were shining, and he was starting to explain you all his memories of Serralunga. So Sperse means nostalgia because of that.
So this wine, 2015, the vintage was a good vintage, right?
Yes, so 2015 was slightly warmer than 16. And our Sperse usually is all about the structure, meaning that it's all about sharp, lean tannins. It's a wine that is very profound, but also is not very showing perfumes when he's young. It's generally not focusing on the fruit. It's more like tar, it's more wet. So
all those nuances.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in a warm vintage like 2015, the wine keeps his own ruth, his own minerality, and is gaining another dimension that usually doesn't have. This beautiful sweet fruit notes that are completing.
It is very, the fruit is very sweet.
So you can feel, when you smell it, you can feel the iron that is a characteristic
of this vineyard. It's delicious. What do we pair these foods with? What's famous?
With this one, you notice that it is slightly bit more sharp in tannins than Barbaresco. So when you
Yes.
have a wine that has a bit more tannins, you have to go with something a little bit more fat. So better to go with a meat like a steak, something that can
The
cut
classic
through the tannins
lamb.
of lamb. Yes.
What about the Barbaresco?
Barbaresco? You go with veal. You can go with white meat.
A little lighter. Chicken, rabbit.
Chicken, rabbit, guinea fowl.
All right, so that's the 2016 Gaia Barbaresco and the 2015 Gaia Sparse Barolo. All right, we got to wrap up, Gaia. Could sit here and talk all day. If you have a question, suggestion, wine happening in our event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's Sam at the Grape Nation. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. On Instagram, we're at SBenRuby. And on Twitter, we're at BenRuby. I know it's confusing. Use the hashtag The Grape Nation. As I said before, Gaia, we will post your wine list answers. The reason I ask people like you those questions is people love to hear what you're drinking. And I will post all the wine selections, our weekly wine sips, so people know what we were drinking. If we want more information about Gaia, you're not big on the websites and all that. Where do we find more info? Do you have any social media? Do you have a personal account?
We can go on your radio channel.
What's that?
Your radio channel.
Yes,
Your
okay.
show.
So we'll leave, you would just Google Gaia and figure
Yes.
it out on your own. I think your dad realized it's not about the website, it's about the wines. All right, thank you to our guest, Gaia. Thank you to our engineers at Heritage and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam BenRuby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation.
The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. And thanks for listening.